And we're live. Welcome to the PCS Q&A Coronavirus Edition. I'm your host, MJ Boyce, and I am the Director of Community Outreach for PCS Grades. As always, we have our Megan Harless, our PCS Reform Advocate Guru Extraordinaire. Like we need more on our titles. No, yes, add all the titles, people. Yes, so we're very, very excited about our guests today. We've got Michelle and we've got Shannon, they're special education advocates. We're going to introduce them in just a second. But first, a couple housekeeping items. We say it all the time, people. This is how I roll. We bring these experts here for you, just for you, because what's going on right now in COVID land, and oh, by the way, PCSing, well, let's just say that everybody is in the same boat. We are here to provide you the answers. Our experts are here to provide you the answers. And if we don't know those answers, we're going to find out who does. We know who does. And if we don't know either of those things, well, guess what? We're going to take your questions for action, and we're going to get back to you with the answers. Speaking of questions, if you have any, please leave them in the comment section below. We'll get right to them. Second thing on my list is with these resources, again, with these experts, we bring them here for your informational purposes. They either know the things, whether it's education, whether it's PCSing, whether it's your household goods, whether it's your movers or your claims. Whatever it is, they are the experts. But when it comes right down to it with you and your specific situation and your family specific situation, the end all be all resources for you will forever and always be your local chain of command and your local transportation office. Those are the people who know you. Those are the people who are dealing with your stuff. They know your specific situations, and they can work with you accordingly. Last thing on my list, we are flattening the curve, people. We are flattening the curve. We are doing our part to flatten the curve, and guess what? I'll say it all day. We're going to flatten Murphy with it, right? Okay, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Megan for some DoD Stop Move updates.
Hello, everybody. So the date that we're all still working with is June 30th. I know they say every 2 weeks they're going to reevaluate to see if we need to extend the stop move order or curtail it. Everybody's been waiting for about the last week and a half for an announcement to happen. And the truth is that no announcement means it's still June 30th. I don't expect them to come out every 2 weeks and say it's still June 30th. I think it's the no news is good news kind of situation. And so they haven't made an announcement. So it's still June 30th. There's been a lot of confusion as to it being the June 30th day, as people have seen orders starting to change within their different service branches. And so one thing to keep in mind is the June 30th date is from the Secretary of Defense. Only him, Congress, or the president can change that date. A lot of people are starting to see their orders change, their report dates change, and that's service specific as they go through and figure out how they're going to move people this year and what the extended peak season is going to look like and what that process is. So just keep in mind, those are two very different things, and a lot of the services are starting to publish this week their guidance with how orders are changing. The Marine Corps just issued a new MAR admin last night with guidance on how they're changing their dates as well for those impacted by the stop move order. The last update I've got for you really, Congress is introducing some new legislation that we're going to be watching dealing with the SCRA, the Service Member Civil Relief Act. That's an act that's put in place to kind of provide service members some protections in regards to housing leases and terminations and things like that. They're looking at trying to adjust that to be able to add in some criteria for stop move orders. Certainly unprecedented time that we're living in. Stop move orders were never a part of the SCRA before, and so they're looking at trying to change that to include that as part of that regulation. So we'll be watching that, and as anything with that gets changed, updated, we'll be sure to bring that information to you as well. Back to you, MJ.
Awesome. Thanks for those updates, Megan. I truly appreciate it, and so does everybody else out there. Look, things are changing on the daily, people. What is true today may not be true tomorrow. So that's why you definitely have to continuously follow up. If you want to follow the PCS Grades Facebook page and our blog, we also update those, and Megan updates us on those DoD changes. Because again, as we all know, the hurry up and wait situation also equals the whole
Yeah.
What happens now? Like, how I'm just going to put it out there. How many of you have been in limbo before? How many of you have been told, no, this isn't going to happen, and then it happens, or vice versa? Military life. I think the civilians in our lives are kind of getting a feel for what we're going through on the daily. Mm-hmm. All right. So we're going to introduce our two special education advocates. And our topic today is about EFMP, our EFMP kids and moving schools. Our service members across the board, there are over 130 service members, 130,000, I'm sorry, 130,000 service members who have an EFMP family member in their house. And oh, by the way, a lot of them are our children. And oh, by the way, a lot of them already are struggling to coordinate through the EFMP program. That being said, we've got some awesome mill spouses who've got our backs, and I'm going to introduce them now. First up, let's go with Michelle.
Hey guys, nice to see you, MJ and Megan. Thank you for hosting us today. I am Michelle Norman, and I'm a Navy spouse of 25 years, and I have two children. My daughter, Marissa, she has special needs, and she has basically been my inspiration, our inspiration as a family, as we have advocated for her right to an appropriate education for these past 6 years. And it's been quite the journey. It's been a lot of struggles, but word got out of our battle and our successes. And we started hearing from a lot of military service, lot of military families across the service branches. And they basically said, hey, this is my story. And we realized that we were not alone. And so that led to the co-founding of Partners in Promise, which is a grassroots organization comprised of 4 military spouses, including Shannon. And our big takeaway is to advocate and educate our military families with children with special needs and for their education. And we're trying to really push for special education reform on all levels, including federal, DOD, state, and the local areas. So it's we hope that we've all actually advocated individually, but we knew that we were stronger together, and that's why we joined forces, and hoping to make a lot of greater impact as a group for all the challenges and struggles that our EFMP families face when they move and go into new school districts. So thanks for having us today.
Oh, awesome. Shannon, let's go ahead and hear what you got going on.
Hi, thank you for having us. I am a Navy spouse for 16 years. I have 2 children. My youngest son, Wesley, has special needs. He has been receiving special education services for the past 9 years. We've had, similar to Michelle, we've had some success. We've had some struggles. We've had many moves and a lot of challenges that go along with those moves. And I'm also the co-founder of Partners in Promise. Michelle and I realized when we met online that we had very similar struggles. And so like she mentioned, we decided to kind of join forces and advocate for special education reform for military children at the federal, state, and local level. So we've made a little bit of progress. So it's been good. And here we are.
That is awesome. And can I just say, this is literally like have you ever heard the term take it to the porch? Like, we solve the world's problems with a glass of wine and a rocking chair on the porch. I'm just saying, it happens, especially with military spouses. And in a much, I look at the online world as one big front porch, because a lot of times we communicate online before we meet in person, which is kind of vice versa. But in our world, we're so mobile, we have to be. So I want to say kudos for taking the initiative to not only take care of, hey, this is what we're going through, let's fix it. Hey, this is what a lot of military families are going through, let's fix it. And I really, really love it. Yeah. So just for our audience to get a better understanding, and for those of you who are watching, if you don't have an EFMP child or spouse, let me just go ahead and tell you that we are all a breath away from disability, okay? Just because what's true today is, again, doesn't mean it's going to be true tomorrow. So this is something that you really want to kind of take heed to. You may not care today, but what happens tomorrow? and you also know people, you care about people who might be in these situations. That's another thing. So before we get into how COVID is impacting your special needs students, let's start with some of the issues that were already impacting our EFMP kids. Like, so if I'm the parent of a MIL kid, if I'm the parent of a special needs student, what types of challenges might I already be facing pre-COVID? Let's start with you, Shannon.
So we've always said this, we have a lot of, unique challenges moving an EFMP child. And, we don't have we don't have local family supports. We're often moving to an area where we don't really know anybody. We don't know how the school system operates. You could have the service member could be on deployment or could be, TAD somewhere. You're moving alone with the kids. He's staying behind for a few months. You're moving ahead. It's so variable, I think, for military families. A lot of the uncertainties that, civilian families may not go through as frequently as military families. So in preparing for a PCS, as many of you probably know, there's a lot that goes into that: the planning, the movers, the doctor's appointments, the updated records. But with the EFMP families, they're also transferring medical care, getting on wait lists, looking for specialists, applying for new state Medicaid waivers if available, getting on respite care wait lists, identifying therapists. The list just, goes on and on. There's a lot that goes into that. I know in our particular situation, my son has a lot of home service providers. He has autism, so we need a lot of supports. So one of the things we do is try to identify supports on the other side of the PCS long before we move. And, EFMP is not standardized as of yet across the service branches.
Right.
So that makes it especially challenging. When I'm trying to hire a therapist in California, but I'm in Maryland and we're going to be switching regions, the referrals don't go through, and, it makes it's challenging. That's before COVID. So yeah, we kind of had a lot going on. And then there's the moving with an IEP, individualized education plan. Those are, in our case, for example, my son has in his IEP, he has services that are provided by outside contractors. Usually school districts don't have that staff available. So really planning ahead of time and reaching out months before we move is crucial to a seamless transition.
And I'll pipe in a little bit on that. It definitely is one of the top 3 issues for military families is education, because I think all military families worry about the quality of education that they'll receive at the new gaining duty station. Mm-hmm. But our EFMP kids are moving with those IEPs, which are those individualized education programs. And those IEPs are mandated under federal law by IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And so having an IEP really does bring in its own set of challenges, because you're not just going on greatschools.org and trying to find out where the newer schools are, the most caring teachers. The stakes are much higher with our EFMP kids when you move. For instance, you might have a child in a particular placement in your current duty station, and you need to know if that placement is even available at the neighborhood school that you're going to. And so it takes a lot of time, a lot of research, and then maybe it's not available in that neighborhood school. Maybe your child would have to get on a bus for an hour to get that appropriate placement. So again, the amount of research and time and effort it is for our families just to make sure that, you do all the research on where you want to live, what services are available in that area. All those pieces make huge impacts on their education. And you want to do it right, because all that progress that you just spent hours and hours upon and at this current duty station could all be wiped, and your child can regress within an instant at your new duty station. So it does take a lot of effort to really coordinate and lean on your networks and your resources to try to figure out where the best place is for PCSing. And that was all pre-COVID.
Yeah, that's pre-COVID.
Pre.
Go ahead, Megan. Megan, go ahead with your.
Yeah. So now we're in this pandemic. We're in COVID. Schools have closed in-person learning. We're all doing distance learning. My kids, we did it this morning at our kitchen table. I wanted to pull my hair out. The DoD has issued this stop movement order, so a lot of families are stuck in place. So, we talked a lot about what the issues were that families faced before COVID. So now that we're in this new area of life with COVID, like what are some challenges now that EFMP kids and families are facing and having?
But you're right, Megan. It is all of a sudden these EFMP families, so all families have to wear these new hats now, but the EFMP family now has like a tremendous amount of new hats. Obviously, you're the parent trying to make sure that, you're keeping everything together, the lifeline of your family. Now you're the protector. EFMP families really have that extra hat because a lot of our children are very medically complex. A lot of them have underlying medical conditions. And so we definitely don't want to take any extra risk in our children getting sick. And so some of the families that were relying on therapists coming to the home, perhaps even a respite care provider, that's all been shut down. So now you have become the protector. You've become the teacher, obviously. And that's not an easy thing with a lot of our kids. You become the therapist because a lot of our kids are getting speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, ABA therapy, even psychological services. And so now you're wearing this hat. And then, and by the way, many EFMP families are geographically separated, from their service member. It could be by choice because maybe there were not the correct services medically and educationally available where your service members now, or maybe they're deployed. And so now you are managing the household. And oh, by the way, you might have PCS that you have to manage too. So it's just, the burden falls upon us, because we are the child's best advocate, but it is definitely a lot of burdens to take to try to manage. So I'll tell you a little bit about these IEPs. They are mandated by federal law, which is IDA, which says every child is entitled to a free, appropriate public education, which we call FAPE. And you may have seen in the news recently that Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, was considering waivers for a while there within like 30 days of the CARES Act that came out, and to whether or not she would approve any waivers to special education and to whether or not our students are still allowed to get the FAPE that they're entitled to. Unfortunately, there have been no waivers for that. So IDEA is still in effect. But guess what? That looks different for each state because each state is charged with implementing FAPE and through IDEA. And even within the same state, some school districts are doing things differently than the school district right next to them. So we've seen the gamut, and we've heard from military families across the United States and the world. And some school districts are doing a fantastic job where they've got this virtual online thing going. They've got one-on-one Zooms or small classroom Zooms. They've got modified assignments coming in. It's crazy. It's wonderful. It's amazing. And then you've got some school districts that are handling it by just doing the same thing you would do for a general education student. So here's a packet of information that your peer next to you has as well. So that's not going to work for our kiddos. And then you got some school districts that are not doing anything at all because they are worried about violating IDEA. And that is a very sad situation because it's a huge disservice to our students. And so there's a lot of confusion right now because schools are all over the place. And even when the ones that do these amazing virtual, online teaching, that may not be right for every kid. Not every kid can sit in front of a computer.
Can I just say, as an adult who got her degree mostly online, I couldn't do it. I did not have the self-discipline. I did not have the attention span, if you will, to sit there on a computer. I needed interaction. I needed a person in front of me breaking it down Barney style because that's how I learn. So I can only imagine being, a school age kid having to do that now. If I, as an adult, couldn't handle it, I just can't.
You're absolutely right. And I think the key is going back to what an IEP stands for. It's supposed to be individualized. And so hopefully, and we've been definitely promoting partnerships, partner with your school, get that communication going, because what may work for one child is not necessarily going to work for another child. But I think there is a silver lining to like all of this, is that parents have told us that they finally can see how their child operates and how they learn. You know, for once, for the first time, they can see my child really is not on grade level reading, or my child is more of a virtual learner versus auditory, or, you know, there's so many things that you can see when you work with them on a daily basis, if they're lucky enough to. Because I know that there are families at work that this is really a huge struggle for them to be able to sit beside them and do some of this work with them. But there are some silver lining as far as like, you are now the person who truly understands what your child's needs are. And that's going to come in handy in the future when you're advocating for an appropriate IEP later on, because now you are going to be able to fill in the pieces as far as what is their present level of performance. Well, guess what? You are now the person who's going to be the expert in that. And I think, Shannon, you were going to talk a little bit about what it's like at your house.
Well,
yes, really quick, before you do that, I just want to acknowledge all of those who have left questions and are continuing to leave questions. I promise you we're going to get to them. We usually save them for the end, but as we're discussing things, if yours lines up with what's happening, we'll go ahead and throw it up there, but you will have your question. You will be popped up there, I promise. Okay, I'm sorry. Go right ahead, Shannon. Tell us.
So as Michelle was saying, it right now during COVID, IEP implementation looks it should look different for every kid because it's individualized. So my son, for example, receives instruction 20 minutes per day, 3 days a week. And when you think, okay, that's nothing. It's 20 minutes of one-on-one teaching from his teacher and speech therapy, 20 minutes once per week. He is so anxious the entire 20 minutes, he can hardly contain himself. It truly is a struggle some days. Now he's getting better at it. The funny thing is he's, answering all the questions right. He's reading the stories. He's doing his math problems. But 20 minutes is probably the max that he can do. So that's appropriate.
20 minutes is the max that I could do.
Right. So that is appropriate. And then in the evening, we do have homework every day that I work with him. And it has been kind of eye-opening. Even for me, I can now see a more in-depth look as to how he processes information. And it's been good. So definitely eye-opening.
And you know what? It's interesting because, Jen, hi, Jen. It's good to see you again. Thanks for following. She says, I don't have special needs children, and we're hating online distance learning. I can't imagine trying to tackle this with an IEP, which, obviously she's kind of preaching to the choir here, but it is kind of unimaginable until you're going through it. But listening to you, you're educating the public on this one. And we've all dealt with the bureaucracy. In some form or another, especially when it comes to PCSing, especially when it comes to schools, whether you have a special needs kid or not, we all know that bureaucracy, that red tape, if you will. So I just kind of want to get this kind of straight. So Department of Education said, you gotta keep no waivers. You gotta keep the IEP plans. You gotta give them accommodations. You got to make sure that you're doing what you can so that they can succeed, so our special needs kids can succeed. But what schools have been doing, some districts in some places, which shall not be named, because it could be happening and all over, is this piece of paper. This what was it called, Michelle, when we were talking about the transition plan?
Transition learning plan or temporary learning plan.
Temporary learning plan. And so, for a lot of people who are advocating or just new to it, looking at that, you might say, okay, well, this is just for now, but it could impact the future. So my question is, Shannon, what are some things that parents can do to hold school officials and districts accountable?
One thing that we say is, again, try to work together, try to be collaborative, and keep documentation. One of the things that I did when this first started was I took documentation, present levels of performance, which is basically, so I knew baseline on all of my son's IEP goals. I knew where he was. It just so happened that the end of the quarter coincided with the start of this. So I did have a progress report from his teacher with data. So I know exactly where he is. And I will know when we get back to real school, which here in Maryland probably won't be until next January. They are already talking about not doing full schooling in the fall. So I will get to see how much he has missed, if he has regressed, and what type of resources we'll need to make up for that time to get him back if necessary. But I take data, pay attention, keep notes. I take notes almost every day. I have a log sheet. We have a form on our website. We have a checklist that parents can go through that gives some tips and some strategies, and really read over a copy of that temporary learning plan. I'm kind of fortunate. We have a good relationship with the district here, that the teacher and I and the administration, we kind of operate on the same wavelengths, which is good. I don't know. They know Wesley, they know my son very well, that if I wanted to make some changes to the IEP, they would be open to exploring that with us. So I am kind of lucky in that. But a lot of that is data driven. I take lots of data. And what I mean by that is in the checklist that we have on our website, like I mentioned.
Which, by the way, we're going to get that checklist, and we're going to put their Partners in Promise website link down in the comments before this is probably even over. It's going to be in there.
Has a lot of good tips. So I think if everybody could check that out, that would provide some help.
Yeah. So you were talking about the data that you would keep is like, assignments and stuff.
So what I do is I look at the original IEP and compare it to the temporary learning plan that we have, along with all of the services that were missed, every scheduled meeting that he has with his teacher, all of the assignments. I keep logs of all of that. So if it comes back next year that he's, even further behind, it makes it a little bit easier to advocate when you have exact numbers of, okay, well, he was supposed to get 2 hours weekly of speech therapy and he hasn't made any progress in speech. Well, he's only been getting 20 minutes once per week and it's been 15 sessions. And so that's kind of what we do. Michelle, do you have any tips for
holding school officials accountable?
I agree. It is really, unfortunately, that burden falls upon you again to be organized and to collect that data, because the data drives everything. It drives everything in that IEP, and that is the best way to advocate for your child. So please go to our checklist and start gathering your important information. It really is. And again, we're always pushing for partnerships, but we'll get in more into that a little bit later.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so, a lot of families are kind of stuck in a stop move order right now with PCSing, but PCSing in general with an EFMP child is very difficult for families to do. As you guys have mentioned before, trying to get resources set up on the other end before the move so you can try to slide right in. What are the big must-haves or must-dos that families should be doing to make sure that their kids don't fall through the cracks during a PCS to ensure that smooth transition?
That's a great question. So I think, again, what Shannon said, let's get that checklist, get your documents in order and start preparing for that PCS move. We also suggest waiting to not announce those PCS dates or that there's one coming up. Because there's a lot of reasons. We don't know when you're PCSing. I mean, we think you know when you're PCSing, but you really don't know yet. So we're advocating for don't offer that information quite yet, because let's say you could be taking yourself out of ESY.
What is that?
That's basically extended school year services. And so that could be summer school. It could be a lot of different things, but a lot of people associate it with, extra learning in the summertime, although it can take other forms as well. But if you announce something too early, they may just write you off and say, well, they're going to be leaving. And so we advise folks to just hold on to that information so you have your written hard copy orders. And even sometimes that's not enough, but, just kind of pretend you're going to be in this place for a year, extra year. That way you can advocate for compensatory services if that's necessary, or ESY services, whatever it means. But don't offer that information. One of those things in the checklist we asked for is to invest in a binder. And this is a binder strictly for this pandemic period where you can get your documents in order, and keep that aside when you do your pack out, because you don't want that important documentation to go away when you eventually do get your household folks. And so, yeah, Shannon has a great binder over there.
I have a lot of binders.
Hey, you know what? Hold that up to the camera, Shannon. Let's see what you got. Oh my gosh, she's got tabs and she's got rings and she's got lots of text.
Now this one's a small binder because we just PCS'd in August. So this is just for this school district this year. And it's been relatively uneventful, which is good. So I don't have boxes of paper like I do from the last district. But these are things there are things in here, like these are recent evaluations, professional evaluations, the current IEP, progress reports. These are all things that the new school would want to see right away. As soon as you get there, they would kind of want to see what's going on with your child. And we do suggest, if possible, make contact with the district ahead of time as soon as you have hard copy orders, and ask if they will take a look at the IEP before you get there. Some will, some won't.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And also we do want, if you can, reach out to your current child's case manager or current child special education teacher before you leave. Have them type an email out saying, this is where your child is currently. This is in their eyes, this is what their present level performance is. I think that information might be helpful for the gaining, school to see where that teacher thought where their performance was before they left the school district. So if they can type a little email saying, Johnny, was at a grade level 2 for reading and, XYZ, boom, print it out, put it in your binder, and then you'll have some more data for you to help advocate again when you get to your new school. For sure.
So I'm going to kind of give a little back brief on this next question. So have you ever heard of the stories where, like a woman will go to get her car fixed, right? And the mechanic assumes that she does not know what in God's name she's talking about and pretty much rips her off. And she has no recourse and she's frustrated. And now she's got this $5,000 bill versus this $100 oil change that she was supposed to get. And it's a very, very frustrating place to be in. So I did not want to be that person. And I took auto shop in high school and I took the advanced auto shop the following year. And I knew more about cars than my male counterparts for the most part. So that on the offshoot that I go in and say, hey, I need an oil change, and they're trying to come at me with, no, you need a new transmission, your carburetor's screwed, and I'm going to be like, all right, let me go ahead and drop some knowledge on you. You ain't messing with just every other person, okay? Write it down. I was just always waiting to just drop that bomb, be like, what now? So I'm going to equate this to the same thing because I too have an EFMP kid, okay? And I too had to kind of sometimes, I say fight, but it was advocate. And I had to go through a process. Yes, always start with collaboration and team approach and partnership approach because we're all there for one person. That is our kid.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't start out that way. And sometimes you have to stomp your feet. Now, how you stomp your feet is what matters. And the way that I stomped my feet was the same approach that I took to learning how to work on cars, which was I learned everything there was to know about my child's rights and about how to make sure that he had a free and appropriate public education. That's it. That's it. That's what I went in there for. That was my end game. I didn't care how I had to get there. I just needed to get that for him. And so I learned everything there was to know about my child's rights. That being said, what would you suggest for that frustrated parent if they're receiving that pushback from your child's teachers or administrators or the district at large? And I will let you fight over that, who gets the answer first.
Well, I'll speak up a little bit first. MJ, you did exactly everything that we would recommend. Is you need to educate yourself and utilize the resources that are out there. Now, granted, not all resources are available and not are all effective, but it's important to at least try, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So we always say, if you're having any problems, contact some folks to let them know and see what they can offer. One would be your EFMP case manager. And that can vary. So for instance, if you're in the Marine Corps and you do that, that could be a good situation because they have advocates in their office that can attend IEP meetings. And if things escalate to a certain point, they actually have attorneys, special education attorneys that can help, mitigate some of the issues and come to a good resolution. If you're in another service branch, unfortunately, because they're not standardized, it really kind of depends. I know that, some bases will have some that will come to your IEP meeting and some don't. So again, they don't know what they don't know. So it's important to reach out to EFMP case manager and tell them that you're having issues so they can document that you called them. Same thing with a school liaison officer. Yes, I know it's not in their job description to advocate, but they need to know that there are problems with the school district that they are liaising on with. So that's the next thing. The third one is to contact your legal office. Again, that's going to be great in the Marine Corps right now. The other ones are somewhat saying they have some availability to help in who knows what that could be. It could be like, here's some resources you can go to. Here's some pro bono organizations that might take your case. I know that the Navy's doing a fantastic job because they are implementing a pilot program here in the Hampton Roads area and in San Diego to get some special education attorneys on board. So contacting that legal office, see if that's in place yet, is very important. So those are like some base, DOD places. Obviously, there's Military One Source, although I've heard a lot of frustration with that because a lot of times it's a case-by-case scenario and you need a live person to really talk to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Some other resources, let's see, Wright's Law, which is online. Peter Wright is amazing. He has a great book called Emotions to Advocacy. It's like the Bible. And so, maybe you can get it on Audible. I don't know if it's on Audible yet, if you have no time, but it is really, I still have it. And I even flip through it every once in a while. So there's also COPA, which is the Council of Parent Advocates and Attorneys. And they have a military membership rate, which Jeremy Hilton negotiated many years ago.
Shout out.
Yeah.
Shout out, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you for your advocacy, Jeremy. So they are also a great resource. And each state has parent training centers. For here in Virginia, it's called PTC, and there's another one as well. I forget what it's called in Maryland, but each state has one that you can contact.
We have CCAC, which is it was very helpful years ago when we were kind of just getting started. but it's a special education citizens advisory committee, and each district has one.
Like
And
each district, like across the board?
they should. Michelle, is that?
We have a SEAC here too.
We have a
that's not the
CCAC
thing.
here. In California, there was the CAC. It was the Citizens Advisory Committee. It was made up of special ed parents, and they were very helpful. I found a lot of kindred spirits. Those parents they were my lifeline, and could kind of help me navigate even just things like, years ago when we first moved to Maryland back in 2012, we were having some difficulty. And it was interesting. Somebody said, well, the director of special education she's pretty approachable. Why don't you guys just give her a call? And we're thinking, really? Is that really a thing? And sure enough, my husband called her and she was like, okay, yeah, let's sit down and talk about this. Let's work together and let's figure this out. And we're like, who knew?
Okay. Yes.
We'll do that. So there's always parents that have kind of been in the game longer than you in your district that kind of know if there's discount advocates in the area. I know there are some around here that are affordable. I know out in California, there was a lot of parent advocates. Some of them would even help, other families for free. So there's a lot of nonprofits too that offer some free help. I know there's 2 organizations here. So there are some resources out there until we can kind of work through the special education reform help for military families that we're working on. Partners in Promise. It's not there yet, but hopefully soon.
Will be. So we have some great comments and questions before we get to, because you guys have a lot of great resources and tips and advice to give us. And we have a lot. Before we get to that, we have a lot of wow. So first up, we got a shout out from Paulette Fryer. Hi, Paulette. And congratulations,
Hi.
Paulette happens to be the 2020 Armed Forces Insurance Military Spouse of the Year. So represent, girlfriend.
Wow.
She's Coast Guard spouse. All right. Next up is a question from Jennifer. Hey, Jennifer. How can we make things easier for your families, meaning EFMP families?
That's a great question. I think that, I guess it depends on a lot of things. We could certainly use the support that we're doing right now as far as reforming special education. Joining our newsletter and updates at our website. Some things that we're doing are advocating for legislation that's been introduced right now in this Congress, HR 6489, which incorporated a lot of the initiatives that we put together in the Promise Act, which is protecting the rights of military children in special education. And we were fortunate to testify on February 5th regarding EFMP challenges. And so they were really listening. Those legislators took notes and they said, it's been a long time since we've done any reform of EFMP, definitely over a decade. So a lot of those have been incorporated into that bill. And so we're hoping that folks will contact their legislators to support it because it really will shape and change how our EFMP families can move from place to place, ensure they have services in place for them, educational services, medical services, respite care services. Those are the type of things that we need to keep advocating on so that we see change and can help our families immediately. Mm-hmm. And I think we're on the right track. So I think that's one way to make our life easy is just partner with us. We're the family next door. And, we're all in this together. And if we can definitely, work together, things, not just, EFMP, military spouse employment, there's so many other issues that we can work together on. We would appreciate that support. There's a lot of things. Shannon, do you have anything to add?
I think you've, I think it was telling at the February 5th hearing when so many military families showed up that they didn't all fit in the room. the leaders really loved to see that. They thought, oh, wow, this isn't just, four spouses testifying about EFMP. There's a whole lot of people behind these spouses that are also EFMP families. So that is important. Get out there and show support. If there's events that are local to you, if there's any town halls, if you're able to attend any of those, it really does make a difference.
Absolutely.
For sure. And I know that because, obviously it's kind of like, one finger can do some damage, but you ball all them fingers into one mighty fist and we can pack a huge punch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think another important thing to remember is we're not the only ones that, are having problems. The civilian community also are having their own challenges within special education as well. So hopefully if we can see reform in the military, that will translate into what we're hoping is reform within the greater community. And that's why we've been working very hard and reaching out to other organizations that are specifically special education, learning disabilities, a lot of dyslexia community organizations, because we realize that if we can set some of this reform now, it will help them as well, the civilian community. So it's definitely a very wide spectrum here that we're trying to make change in.
For sure. One step at a time, right? One foot in front of the other. Stacy. So she has a question. Do you transition your special ed or EFMP kiddos the same as regular classroom kiddos? Like, what do families do with multiple kiddos with different needs?
Well, I think I can answer that, I guess, because I have one typical child and one special needs child. So it can be challenging, and it kind of goes back to what Michelle said in the beginning. Try to identify, we transition them very similarly, but the problem with EFMP, one of the challenges with a kid in special ed is the location, because the services for a particular student may not be available at your home school, for example. So they might be bused to another location. That, could be an hour bus ride. So you try to identify where they both would go that's relatively close to where you're going to live. It's kind of hard.
It is. And that's a great question, Stacy.
That's a good question. Yeah.
I think that for our family, we look at all the kids, but who has the greatest need? And unfortunately, that's going to take the precedent. You may have a neurotypical child that, is really great in soccer. Perhaps you would think, oh, I need to go to the school. But more often than not, the precedent will go to the one that has the greatest need, the greatest involvement, and you make those sacrifices. I will say that, the siblings of our children are heroes. They give so much throughout their life, and I'm going to get a little teary-eyed because I'm going to think about, one day I won't be here, but it's going to be the siblings that are going to help each other through. And they make constant sacrifice, and not just as a military child, but also as a sibling to, a child that has special needs. And so a shout out to all of them because they're resilient, they're strong. And, when you transition, unfortunately, sometimes their needs are not as met as the others. And so we recognize that. It's just, one more thing to add to the issues that we have. Sorry.
No, and that's okay. So I almost got teary-eyed too, and let me tell you, I've got some bronzer on my face that would look awful if I did. But no, I do know what you mean. I'm going to tell you, I felt sometimes like I was on autopilot with my daughter for a while because she was doing fine in school, and I had to focus all of my attention on my son at that time. Every now and again, I just give her a big hug and just be like, I see you, I see you. Mm-hmm. So I get that. So the message is hug your children, hug them. Wow, we have a lot. Stacy also had a question about keeping records. You have an education binder. You showed your education binder. So if you could, once this is over, would you, Shannon, mind taking a picture of like the front and kind of like, what it's comprised of? Just take a picture of that or whatever.
Sure.
So that we can post it in the comments to kind of show what kind of stuff that you have. Maybe just put in here, I have tabs for this, and I have, work samples and.
Yeah. So I also keep everything scanned. Every document is scanned too.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's, it's in the cloud as well. So I have it on my phone, but everything is scanned. Medical records too, as along with education.
Yep. Same.
So like ditto.
Yeah, the binder's like this big, the medical one, and I've got 20 tabs in there.
Mm-hmm.
Significant, but it's so helpful when you move and just be able to say, oh, OT, boom, I'm there. Okay, this was the last referral. This is the last script that expired X amount of months ago. Everything is laid out. And I don't, again, scan what you can because the binders can get really big. Mm-hmm. And my attic is full of IEP binders for every school year. And I know I'm crazy because I do both scan and I do hard copy, but that has it has been very helpful. Same. When we do process a couple of times. And I could say, well, actually, when we were here before, 4 years ago, this is what they offered. So, you keep it and you put it in the attic.
The proverbial mic drop, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Like, it's there's this weird satisfaction of being able to be like, bam.
Exactly.
What you got? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm weird. I don't know. I talk about it more than others do. I have no problems with that. Jennifer had a good question. So when you guys were talking about not really necessarily telling their schools, like if you got orders or if you're expecting them or whatever, what about telling the receiving location with verbal orders? Like, should you do that?
I think Shannon touched upon that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. With verbal orders, I don't know with verbal. Because you don't really have a date yet. You don't have an expected arrival date.
So that'd be kind of hard to like pinpoint, at what point in the year they would be there. And that makes sense.
I don't know. What do you think, Michelle?
Do you want to talk about your situation before?
Well,
what had happened was.
Well, we had hard copy orders at the time. We were moving, we were PCSing, and I reached out to the school district, and this frequently does happen, we've heard, is the district says, well, we're not going to talk to you until you have an address in the district. And you're like, well, I'm not going to be there for I'm moving there a month or a week before school starts. And there are some districts that just push back and say, sorry, we don't have to talk to you. And yeah, we were hung up on, and that started a very ugly kind of journey there. That should have been.
Do you see my nostrils flaring right now?
Yeah.
It was not good. But I've heard of that happening. So one of the things that we are, pushing for is remote enrollment. That's one of the items that we wrote into the Promise Act that we want to get passed for military families. Is we want them to be able to remotely enroll with hard copy orders, and they don't have to physically be there.
Great. And it should be that way.
Yeah.
The MIC guidelines, which are being worked at the different state levels through the defense liaisons there.
When you say MIC, you mean the Military Interstate Compact, correct?
Yes. They have guidelines, but they're not enforceable. They're not law. And so all states should be remote enrolling. But of course, that varies state to state.
District to
so that's
district.
why we wrote into the Promise Act, is because it is especially important with a child with an IEP to have those services up and running as soon as you get there. And what frequently happens with our children is that you get there, they want to take a look at them in the classroom. They have 30 days to kind of change the IEP and do testing. And a lot of times they will take things out of that IEP. So when you need support the most, when you're transitioning, tends to be a time where our kids lose things, lose support services.
Well, a good example of that is when we moved to California, and they would not allow us to remote enroll, and they wouldn't look at the IEP until 2 weeks before school started. And we had an address because we finally found a place to live, and we signed a lease and we sent it over, and they look at the IEP and they said, oh, he gets adult support on the bus. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, we don't have aides on our special ed buses here. It's going to take us a while to hire somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't have transportation until December.
Oh my God.
And, it's one of those things like, well, we moved in August, we started school, on time, but we reached out to them in March. And if they would have looked at that IEP,
they could have hired somebody.
And he could have, went to school on the school bus. He loves riding the school bus. That's part of his school day. But it's one of those things why remote enrollment is we think is, important. So if you have hard copy orders, there are districts that will look at the IEP ahead of time and help you to provide a smooth transition as much as possible.
God, if anybody who's going to be looking at this legislation and has any decision-making authority, please know that this is if you're listening, it's obviously a huge issue. Mm-hmm. This would benefit all military families. And we already have a bunch of barriers in front of us. Take one away. Come on. Come on. It's really that simple. It doesn't hurt anybody, I promise. Because it's the Promise Act.
Right.
But
I appreciate it.
So let me see. We have so the Branch Military Parent Technical Assistance Center. Thank you for the website. Thank you for putting in a shout out. It has the list of all the centers in the U.S. and the territories in Maryland, Parents Place of Maryland.
Maryland, they're great.
They also said, by the way, ladies, staff at every parent center in the network got the notice about this Facebook Live, and they're hearing us now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see what else we got. Okay. Yes, Jennifer, remote enrollment is key for all militants. You really can't go wrong. Hate to beat a dead horse, but you really just can't. And then last one from Joan. She actually suggests, it's kind of long, so it won't fit on the screen, but she suggests bringing a voice recorder to the meetings, like IEP meetings. And of course, you always inform attendees that they're recording. And the way that she puts it is, I'm recording, and I want everything that everybody's saying is very important to me, and I don't want to miss anything, and thanking them for the support. And then that way what happens is it's just like, if you're on camera, you're going to act different. That kept the meetings very focused for her, and everything was above board. So that's a good strategy, Joan. Thank you very much for putting that out.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joan. I think that one's really good too, because you can actually take notes that you want to take. You don't have to, though, because you're recording it. And if your husband or spouse is being deployed, it's easy to upload that on Dropbox and say, hey, I know you missed the meeting. Why don't you listen to it when you have an hour sometime? And so it really does engage everybody in the family to be on the same sheet of music as far as advocating goes. So great suggestion.
Yeah.
Any other questions that are saved rounds? I promise we'll get to them. We're going to stay in touch with Shannon and Michelle. They're kind of not going to ever get rid of us. So any questions, any saved rounds that you have, or if you're watching the replay and any questions, we will shoot them over to them, or we will answer them as best as possible and get you an answer after the fact. But I believe Megan has something too.
Yeah, so wrapping up, we've heard a lot of great information here, a lot of good resources for families to use. So last, kind of cover all for both of you. Any tips, tricks, anything else that you want to let families know, either just EFMP families in general or EFMP while PCSing, tips and tricks that you would want to share that we haven't already discussed?
I'll start off with that, and I'm going to put my mommy hat on. Go with your gut. I think trust it. You know your child the best. And so if you're going to bed at night stressed, replaying conversations in your mind, something's not sitting right, then chances are it's probably not right. And so I always tell people, find your tribe, talk to other people, get those resources to work for you, go to our website, because there's other people that are going through the situation just like you. And so trust that gut, and try to just give yourself grace, because this is a hard situation. It's a hard life. And sometimes we're hard on each other. Like, I didn't do enough. I could have said this. I could have done that. Just take it a day at a time and go to bed. The next morning, you're up and at it, and you'll work hard again. So just give yourself grace under this whole pandemic, just having a child with special needs. We're going to get through this together. Just keep if you can't even keep up with remote learning or whatever, just keep your kids safe and as happy as possible. We're going to get through this together.
Did you hear that, Megan? Give yourself some grace, girl. Give
Yes.
yourself some grace.
We are on this is our last week of distance learning at home, where I have to teach my kids and figure out math problems and understand 4th grade grammar again. I'm so excited. I'm thrilled. We got to go more.
Nice.
And Shannon, what kind of stuff do you have for us?
I would say my advice would be to stay organized. That has been key. Hand carry your documents with you, which I think a lot of people already do. That's the basic recommendation for military moving. However, I can't stress that enough. When you bring that IEP binder with you, that goes in the carry-on. It does not go in checked bags. We actually brought a carry-on suitcase with medical records and an IEP. And my husband's like, really? Do we really need to carry that? Yes.
I would say, can you do this as can we get like a credit for Pro Gear? Like,
right?
Really, honestly.
Pro Gear.
That's a great idea. My goodness.
That's what we do. The other thing is make as many plans as you can before you arrive. One thing that has been a tried and true tested resource for me was word of mouth, is find other military spouses who know somebody who's in the new location that can kind of give you the lowdown on what's happening there. Yeah. Kind of an informal way to get set up. But, usually EFMP parents and community members who have children or adults with special needs, they usually are in the know of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So I try to reach out to other military spouses. Hey, I'm moving to San Diego. Hey, I'm moving here. Do you know somebody who has a child with autism? Can you connect me? That's been a great resource. So that's one of my tips.
Nice. And I can tell you how many of those friend of a friends, like this friend introduces me to this friend online, and then they get there, and I can't tell you, like, I'm like this with so many times that has happened. I was just supposed to be like the welcome wagon, and then I'm like, okay, I just stole your best friend. Bye.
It's great. We got a great community of military spouses, and I find it's just an honor to be a part of this group. And they've saved my behind many a times with these type of situations. So. Yeah, it's a blessing. That's the good thing about our military community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. And I really want to thank you guys for being on here today. I know you are hard at work advocating for not just EFMP families, but for all military families, because it impacts us all. As always, Megan, you are a peach, and you will get through this. The light is right there at Friday o'clock. It's going to be awesome. Have some wine to celebrate. If you call me around 5-ish, maybe I'll celebrate with you. So that will wrap up to today's PCS Q&A Coronavirus Edition. And thank you again to Shannon and Michelle. Any questions that you have, please put in the comments. They will have no problems if we shoot them an email, or ladies, feel free to answer them right into the feed if you like. And if you have any questions or want to reach out to us directly, go to pcsgrades.com. That would be awesome too. Really quick, I almost forgot. Holy cow! Stacy, my coworker, would have had my rear end for this. Here's the thing, guys. Quick plug. PCS Grades is doing a real life PCS challenge. And we kind of want to see what your real life PCS looks like. So we're going to be posting something here shortly. And if you want, you can win an awesome necklace from Hope Design.
Oh, wow.
And it says, "This too shall PCS." So if you'd like to get in on that challenge and see what it's about, go ahead and check out our Facebook page here shortly, and we'll get that information to you. But for now, this too shall PCS. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.